was exhausting. Still got the same. Sorry, it's been a while. I got a new Apple Watch and my personality changed completely. Oh, bonanza, shake your body like a belly dancer. The SpongeBob. Everybody, welcome to the stage, Miss Complex. This is my newest book, Complex, which took me a very long time because it is the longest book I have ever written. It is 404 pages if you count the acknowledgments and all that. I designed the cover myself because I'm a genius and perfect in every sense of the word. There was an issue with like the first immediate copies that went out on Amazon. So what happened is that I submitted the Word document instead of a PDF. So that means it's not my font, like a bunch of things got kind of messed up. It's still perfectly readable, and if you bought one of those copies, I said on my Instagram story, now you own a super ultra rare copy because it's fixed now. But basically in the beginning it goes like also by Jane Conquest on Amazon.com. What are you doing there? So sorry about that. That was my bad. I'm very proud of this book, and it's the first book that feels like a book because it's so heavy and massive. I do have to stand for this video because I lost like my gripper thingy for my phone, but if I sat, I forgot to plug in my mic. As I was saying, can somebody review my book so I can put like New York Times, this is the greatest book I ever did read. It took me 11 straight months to write, which is the longest it's taken me other than White Cliches, which was like 4 years not straight. I'm only gonna read 3 chapters because these chapters are long, and the first 3 chapters are purposefully so dense and so wordy because later on they get like shorter, simple language intentionally. So sorry, but I think it's the equivalent of like 5 chapters of any of my other books. Stay tuned to the end for bloopers like usual. The link to buy Complex will be in the description. We have got paperback and ebook versions. The back reads, "This transformative phase in the life of 18-year-old M. Escobar involves the dawn of adulthood in a society dominated by the rise of online influencers. Through M's thoughtful and quick-witted perspective, Complex follows a journey of self-discovery, unusual fame, and even danger." So what I did with See Her is that I made the table of contents a playlist. There's 1 song per chapter. This is another issue with this version where it's not centered. Dedicated to the GOAT, Pat Conroy. I'm just real passionate about this man. So chapter uno. The chapters are half English, half Spanish intentionally. If something seems weird, I did it on purpose. I have been practicing my voices, as I think I've been talking about in a few of my other videos. So for each character, I'm gonna give them a different voice. I'm sorry to everyone that I'm offending. It's just for fun, so don't come for me. Chapter uno. I poisoned myself by cherishing the accomplishment rather than the art. The idea of being 18 and no longer a prodigy, if I had ever been one, with nothing to claim outside of the quantity and variety of my work, the merit of which I incessantly questioned and berated in that dawn of my adulthood, aged me in my mind. I knew it all, including that time had proved that talent alone was not powerful enough to propel me into a status of regard. I felt very old. I had not yet considered the idea of being thankful for my sufferings as well as my triumphs. The recognition that the essence of life is comprised of all the mess and bullshit and embarrassment would cultivate an excitement for its unpredictability where there had once been fear and a sense of injustice. Viewed otherwise, it was suicide. God spoke through my hands, and so the credit was His, not mine. Among the miseries imposed upon me that I attempted to move away from, He was not one of them. But my idea of Him had not yet fully developed, and I knew that faith did not belong to everyone. In the end, we were all on our toes, hoping and praying that the universe would bend in our favor. Sharp dawnlight streamed through the wall-sized window, bathing the back of my eyelids in a red-tinted shimmer. Blinking sleepily, I propped myself up on my elbow and shielded my face with my hand. I had forgotten to pull the blinds down, a reminder that I was still a stranger in my own home, unused to its routines. I ducked my head into the shadowed portion of the bedroom, shifting my legs within the tangle of thin top sheet. Hiding behind a stack of cardboard boxes that obscured a portion of the window, my gaze wandered onto the bare mattress beneath me, studying the sloping contours of the dimples embedded into the soft white. An invisible fist seized my heart, kindling a puissant flare of anxiety. I thought of Texas, where the hot sky baked everything below into a shiny, flat, still life. I was still in the South, but the southern sun I knew did not bathe the world in such artificial saturation and those deep, tenebrific shadows. It was the first swipe of shading that elevated the two-dimensional into realism. I tugged the top sheet over my head, futilely warding off the invasion of the previous night, the uneasiness that had settled over me as I closed the front door to my apartment behind the movers. I had turned around and put my hands on my hips as I stared at the meager cluster of boxes piled throughout the barren rooms. A certain idea tugged at the corner of my mind. The first night in my first apartment should have been filled with I was starting my life euphoria, but instead there had been a heavy aura of disillusionment that crushed me into bed at around 8:30 p.m. I realized that this apartment would never be my home. The nomadic cycle was something I had already been very well acquainted with. I had once again found myself in an inescapable impermanence in which where I lived did not belong to me, but this time I was alone, and I was the renter. Soon after sunrise, I peeled myself from the wrinkled linen and shuffled out into the hallway. My bedroom was carpeted, but the rest of the apartment was floored with shiny, peanut-colored hardwood, and my soft padding turned to small slaps as my feet trod unsteadily onward. On my way to the kitchen, I tripped over a box and laid dejectedly on the floor for about 3 minutes, then pushed myself to my feet and grabbed my pack of cigarettes from the soapstone countertop. "Breakfast of champions," I muttered, my right hand dangling my keychain as my left pushed down the handle to the front door. There was a balcony next to the kitchen, but I decided that the walk downstairs would help wake me up since the complex noticeably lacked an elevator. As I hurried down the windowless corridor, passing 3 white doors identical to mine, my day-old hair swung gracelessly behind me, lightly hitting my neck in the same whisper that is older than hygiene. "I need to be washed, fucker." I had pulled the yellow-blonde locks up into a lopsided ponytail that stretched as high as my bleach-fried hair would allow. "The higher the ponytail, the more successful the woman," my mother would tell me. "I wore my hair like this every day since middle school, Sophia," came the reply, internal as it always was. "Sure did me a lot of good." I gripped the heavy steel door at the end of the hall in both of my hands, hauled it open, then hurried down 3 dimly lit flights to the bottom floor, my pace quickening with anticipation. The stairwell smelled like mold, and I smelled like there had been a deodorant shortage for the last decade. It was seeming as though I had fallen with relative ease into my new routine of a parentless lifestyle. The thought irked me. My family had constantly put such emphasis on closeness and camaraderie that I firmly believed I should be feeling either immense relief or crippling desiderium at such a sudden and complete independence. Instead, a hollow block of nothing sat dizzily in my stomach, like life had always been that way. I had prepared myself for this for a long time, but the abrupt adjustment of my life path going astray left me in an adaptive suspension of senselessness. It was not that I was numb, I was simply beginning to build above the windless vacuum left over from my tumultuous adolescence. I wondered if one day that vacuum might collapse in on itself, and I would finally experience what I was meant to be feeling right then. I also wondered if that was it. Realizing I had forgotten shoes, I eased onto the sides of my feet as the dirty concrete began to blacken my heels. After passing through another door that seemed more fitting for a bank vault than a lobby, I walked across the cool tile and through a dismal space with 3 stock photos framed above a drooping peace lily in the corner. As I neared the front glass doors, I glanced over at the lone desk, which was empty like it had been the day before while I was moving upstairs. I considered paying my landlord, whom I had never met, a visit, then decided that a yellow-shirted Cuban stoner clutching a pack of blacks was probably an unfavorable sight to anyone at 7 in the morning. I pushed open the front door on the right and walked out into a sheltered area in front of the apartment complex. Dark sheet metal laid flat over 4 thin iron pillars, and black gum congregated in the cracks of the concrete ground, which stretched the length of the shade, then rolled adjacently out to the sidewalk lining the street. On my skin, inked with the milky gold of a Spaniard recluse, the morning chill raised goosebumps. Along the road in front of me, palm trees shivered in the receding night and braced themselves to welcome the mild day. My pace quickened with anticipation as I peeled back the foil of the cigarette pack glinting in the dawnlight. Facing away from the front doors, I leaned against the pillar and sparked my lighter. I had made several attempts to paint the feeling of that first drag of the day. The canvas always eventually became poisoned by hatred for money spent in fluid-filled lungs in the form of brown splotches or fiery, anxious crimsons amidst the dizzy pastels of the morning headrush. I must have had to paint it in those moments between the first few puffs and that midway point when I started to feel nauseated and disgusting. I looked forward to it every night when I laid my head down next to my nicotine-stained fingernails, but by the time I ground the stub out beneath my foot, it always felt like the first chore over and done with. The urge woke up on my lips. Sometimes it roused me in the middle of the night, crawling up the back of my scorched throat and dragging my heavy limbs into a certain addiction hypnosis. It was the one thing I was able to depend on that first morning in California, so far from all that was familiar. The door to the complex opened behind me, but I did not turn around, hoping to put off the inevitably awkward introductions with my neighbors for as long as possible. To my dismay, a gruff voice mumbled, "Hey." I glanced over my shoulder to find a white guy standing several feet behind me, his umber hair tucked beneath a backwards baseball cap. My eyes passed over and above the patchy stubble clinging to the curvature of his jaw, and I worried that his raised eyebrows suggested I was in trouble. My hand with the cigarette quickly and guiltily dropped to my side. "Oh, am I not allowed to smoke?" I asked nervously, looking around. I did not see any prohibitive signs, but then again my observational skills were limited to the meaningless fixations of chronic anxiety. The idea that he looked older than me, the fact that I did not have a weapon, the itch to take another puff, and the like. Perhaps that was why my career in art was miserably failing. "No, you're fine," Patchy Beard said, a soft grin of confusion spreading across his lips. "I was just wondering if you had a lighter." He produced a pack of long kings from the pocket of his olive-colored cargo shorts, and I relaxed a little. "Oh, yeah," I said stupidly, reaching down my shirt neckline and into my bra, then pulling out my aquamarine Bic. Patchy Beard smirked as he accepted it from my outstretched hand. "No pockets?" he asked, bemused, a cigarette between his teeth. "Nah," I said, lifting my shirt up to reveal those damn Nike shorts. So cute, but so impractical. Patchy Beard sparked the lighter and lifted it up to the end of his cigarette. They were impressive stoges, the kind that clerks at gas stations keep behind glass. I did not meet his eyes as he handed the lighter back to me, but when he glanced toward the street, I quickly studied him. He was about 5'9" or 10, solidly built and wearing a crisp cerulean tank top. His damson baseball cap seemed badly weathered, and when he turned back to me and I turned back to the ground, I noticed that he was wearing sandals. Guy sandals, the infamous style that fights deserved obscurity where the foot appears to be caught in a lobster trap. "What's up with you?" Patchy Beard asked curiously, then breathed in a short drag. "I haven't seen you around here before." The final words were birthed in a cocoon of ashen cloud. When a smoker speaks through the fumes, it is as if an ancient radio has taken command of his voice. "Do you live in the building?" I asked, hesitantly raising my cigarette to my lips, insecure about its Marlboro basic bitchness. "No, I just crashed at my friend's," Patchy Beard said. "Do you?" "Just moved in," I admitted. "Yesterday, actually." "Wow." He tapped the end of his cigarette, and flakes of ash floated down onto the stained concrete. My eyes stayed trained on that spot as he talked, avoiding his inquisitive stare. "Where from?" "Texas." "Big culture shock." "Huge." I glanced up, managing a smile, and my dry, cracked lips felt painfully stretched from the effort. Note to self, tea before cigarettes in the morning. Also deodorant. Oh God, I hope I'm not upwind. "What's your name?" "Chris." "How old are you?" "I'm 22. You?" 18. "Cool." He watched as I ground my cigarette out on top of a nearby trash can. "You finished that pretty fast." "Bad habit," I sighed. In the unsaid truth, I had sucked down the whole stoge as fast as I could in order to make my hasty escape. Impromptu interactions are far from ideal so early in the morning, especially with the first Los Angelian I had ever met. Feeling an uncomfortable pause looming, I quickly bolted towards the front doors. "I guess I'll see you around, Chris," I said, jamming my key in the lock. "You too," he said, and I yanked the door open. "Wait, what's your name?" I did not turn around. "M," I said, then hurried inside, my dirty feet leaving a trail of grime as I went. "Childish," whispered the footprints. Chapter Dose. My mother once told me, "Your brain isn't fully online yet." Since then, I found myself occasionally wondering when it would kick into gear. The switch flips and suddenly I understand everything behind and all that lies ahead. I was imagining my perspective broadening into a near-omniscient self-awareness wherein I surpassed the final stragglers of teenagerhood and transcended into someone my family could take pride in, someone I could take pride in. I doubted I would ever be satisfied with myself, but at least there was the possibility of a time when I might look into the mirror without shying away. It was mid-May in Los Angeles. I enjoyed the weather one cigarette at a time, without even checking the news on Twitter, as I normally did. Instead, I hid my phone under my pillow in a futile attempt to steer my thoughts away from the exactly 0 messages I had received since leaving Texas. I was content to tuck myself within the walls of my apartment where the unknown, even with all its potential, could not seduce me into disaster. I had not fooled myself into thinking I would visit Rodeo Drive, or the Santa Monica Pier, or any of the other pearls nestled within the oyster of the city. On the third day after my arrival, I considered embarking on a college tour, then deemed it too depressing. The initial plan had been for me to attend some grand Californian university. Right there, that home of the industry where my highly subjective field might have found some profit. I had been rejected by each of the 9 colleges I submitted applications to. Being denied had gradually turned into failed at being accepted, with the arrival of each thin white envelope. My, oh my god, I'm not as smart as everyone told me I was, mental collapse had established itself mid-junior year of high school, so I had long since resigned myself to my status as the family disappointment. Breaking the generational bloodline of successful prodigies was only the Shakespearean seal of approval on my teenage tragedy. At least they still had my brother. I decided to pack my bags for the Golden State anyway. At the very least, I had managed to escape my parents' suffocating disapproval. There had not been even a semblance of the cliché, "It's okay, sweet, perfect child with nice eyebrows. We'll figure it out." My parents were Cuban. Several of their reactions had been borderline homicidal, and none of them could be printed in a family-friendly newspaper. Perhaps the headlines might have read, "World record for how many times goddamn it said within a single hour has been set in Escobar family home." As I unpacked a box of canvases in my bedroom, I reached up and fingered the still tender spot of the small tattoo behind my ear. Well, if my parents do end up murdering me, the authorities will be able to identify my body so long as my posterior auricular survives. Fun fact, as an artist with Google at your disposal, you learn obscure anatomy terms. That spring, I placed my hopes in the ideas that longingly looking up at the tantalizing walls of the schools I had been destined to attend might be enough to spur on some giant creative leap to launch me back into the world of the relevant. A theory of having been able to free myself from my nonsensical rebellion much sooner, if only I had beheld my future beneath the same sun. I had yet to find the motivation for even that, although the distance had shrunk from about 1,500 miles to less than a dozen. I worried it would be too blatant of a reminder that I was already an artist manqué in the dawn of my adulthood. My new apartment was mid-sized for LA prices and squatted on the 3rd floor of a complex halfway between Koreatown and the main metropolis. My parents had put my college money towards the security deposit, the most depressing act of generosity I had ever received, and a few months of rent and utilities, meaning that, when combined with the savings of selling my paintings and being a lifeguard for 4 years, I had a little while before I needed to find a job. Or furniture. The fog of cafard thickened as I began to sketch a new piece on the easel in my bedroom. Creating had become comparable to the feeling I imagine the mortician experienced after finishing a cadaver's makeup for a closed casket ceremony, but I sketched on. I had not seen Chris for several days. In fact, I had not seen anyone. As I lived off what meager supplies I had packed, I was virtually without human contact since he and I had spoken that first morning. The switch did not flip, and I realized I had been expecting it to. Soon enough, I discovered that I was not only out of cigarettes, but also ramen, and decided to brave the LA streets out of dire necessity. I was neck deep in a flurry of agitated, self-deprecating thoughts when Chris and I quite literally bumped into each other. "Easy there!" Chris cried as I slammed into his chest. We were in the stairwell. A few of the overhead lights were broken, and I had not seen him in the shadows. "Oh, hey! What was your name again?" "Hi," I said, a bit relieved that it was not a complete stranger. At least I could give a name to the victim of what was practically an unintended and spontaneously violent hug. Chris was wearing a Gainsborough button-up shirt and black pants, his dark hair tucked beneath another backwards baseball cap. The patchy beard was less shaggy and more close-cropped. He looked nice. "Hi, Chris," I said again, my throat tangling the words. "It's I'm yeah. Where are you going?" "Just to my friends," Chris said, smirking, and I could feel my face warming. "We're going out with a group. You want to come?" An alcohol of panic spilled over the open stove of my chest. "Tonight?" I sputtered. "Yeah," he said. "It'll be fun. We're just getting some drinks at a bar. You have to come if you don't want to." No, I froze. Chris seemed innocuous enough. He did have a key to the complex, but the idea of going 3 days of hermit to full-on out with a whole-ass group was a tsunami of ice water rolling over the desert of monotony that had settled within me. The world dissolved around us, leaving Chris and I standing on the 4th step down from the 2nd floor landing. In the stairwell, I made one last attempt to clamber back over the waterfall, plunging me into the rest of my life. I was not yet who I wanted to be, and I was pretty sure my shirt was inside out. I would, but I haven't showered, I managed to say. That's all right, Chris said, shrugging. We're not heading out for another hour. I came early to pregame. He paused. Where were you going? Just cigarettes. My hands inched upwards, fingering the rough seam on the shoulder of my t-shirt. It was definitely inside out. You're pre-gaming getting drinks? I have cigarettes, Chris whispered, almost flirtingly, and then I was grateful for the poor lighting in the stairwell that sheltered my blush and shadow. My face snapped down, and I became very aware of the fact that he was wearing expensive designer sneakers. I curled my toes in a feeble attempt to hide the way they jutted out over the rubber edges of some $5 flip-flops I had picked up at a Corpus Christi beach the year before, which were also a size too small. Well, at least I remembered to wear shoes this time. And we like to play some drinking games before, you know, Chris continued. I'll go shower then, I conceded, slowly following him up the staircase. He loitered at the entrance to the second floor, his brown eyes watching me slide past him. Your friend lives on the second floor? I asked, pausing halfway up to the third. Yeah, that's right beneath me. That's cool. Stupid thing to say, Em. What's it like down under? Nice save, dipshit. Can't be as sweet as one of the penthouses, he bantered playfully. Do you want to meet here later? Sure. Or actually, here's my Snapchat. He jogged up the short flight and held his hand out to take my phone. I don't have Snapchat, I said helplessly. You don't? He asked, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. I unlocked my phone and showed him the screen where a single folder of apps sat against the background of one of my paintings. Suddenly feeling self-conscious, I wished I had chosen a different wallpaper. It was one of the only pieces my mom had told me she liked, a portrait of my best friend Angelica in a poor imitation of Wilfredo Lamb's abstract style. It was not my favorite. When I looked up, I found that Chris was studying me hard. His brows were set in concentration as he calculated behind his eyes. Is it the painting? Is it the lack of Snapchat? Oh God, it's a combination of both, isn't it? There goes my only potential friend down the shitter. Might as well flush my Snapchat-less ass down with him. All right, he mumbled, then punched his phone number into my contacts. Sorry, I said, though I was not sure what for, an apology seemed warranted. It's fine, Chris said, but there was no trace of a smile on his face. Text me in a little while, okay? Okay, I said, and as he headed back down the stairs and disappeared through the doors to the second floor, the regret seeped in, marching through my veins like line soldiers crawling through the war-torn countryside. Dragging my feet back to my apartment, I began to revisit the conversation in my mind, dissecting my mistakes and neglecting to find any successes. Maybe it's just me. M, 11:54 p.m. Hey, it's M. Still going out? Chris, 11:56 p.m. Yeah, meeting 5? Stairs. I had already been ready for 15 minutes, following a frantic shower and half an hour of rushing around my apartment, picking and repicking what I was going to wear. Half-open boxes were strewn around the floor of the living room, crumpled clothes spilling out of them as if a celebration had suddenly evaporated into the night. After endlessly indecisive second-guessing, I finally settled on a short black dress with golden flakes woven into the chiffon. Not too conspicuous, not too boring. I was playing it safe. I was not even worried about the fact that I was going out with a strange man I had had exactly 2 conversations with and his nameless, faceless friends. Rather, I was preoccupied with practicing my posture and neutral faces in the bathroom mirror, an anxiety habit I had picked up long before that night. Besides, my mother had stuffed a pepper spray in my purse before the words Los Angeles even left my mouth. I smoothed down the folds of my dress and leaned forward to peer down at my heels. I chose black 2-inchers, which would not get too uncomfortable if there was going to be dancing, but were still elegant enough to pair with the dress. Minimal makeup was slathered over my face to coincide with the blending in theme. My thick, frizzy hair hung in fluorescent waves around my shoulders, and I briefly considered heating up my curling iron, but then the 5 minutes were up. The look would have to do. The moment I stepped out onto the 3rd floor landing, I wished I had just gone to get my ramen. There they were, all 6 of them. In the hallway, the nerves that drummed the song of impending doom had drowned out the group's racket, but it was evident they had been drinking for a while. They stood on the 2nd floor landing, and Chris was the antithesis of the stoic, collected guy I had bumped into only an hour earlier. His head was thrown back in laughter, and his brown hair spilled messily out from beneath his backwards baseball cap. His arm was around the shoulders of another white guy taller than he was, who had short, wavy hair, a lighter shade of brown than Chris's, more taupe than umber. I noticed that there were women there, but I did not have time to process anything else before I was spotted. "Aye, there she is," Chris shrieked, and all eyes turned to me, the laughter dying down a bit. I lowered my gaze and grasped the shoulder strap of my purse, focusing on clopping down the stairs without tripping. I felt myself beginning to assume the quiet, nervous attitude I tended to adopt whenever I was around people I wanted to impress. The pressure seemed to mount with each step I took towards the second-floor landing. Here was when California M would make her debut. Here was where this chapter of my life would begin. It felt so concrete, as if there was no going back after these people met me. I could turn around, return to my third-floor hidey-hole, and never make another friend again. But I knew that was not realistic, and as much as I would have loved to spend the rest of my life without ever interacting with anyone again, I decided that if I must bite the bullet, it might as well be here. For a moment, I was so lost in the possibilities, I forgot who I was entirely. I could be funny. I could be smart. I could even lie, tell them that I was a renowned painter, a student at a Californian university. My best friend Angelica once said that speaking things out loud manifests them into reality, but deception is tricky. I knew all too well the difficulties of keeping a story straight, but then again, my parents had always told me that sometimes the hardest path was the right one. If there was one thing I believed in, other than God, it was karma. I would not have been there, friendless in South Westlake, if it had not been for my past fuck-ups. Lying might have created further bad energy that came back around to bite me in the ass. This was my karma. I did not need any more. Unfortunately, I was who I was. They were all still staring at me when I reached the second-floor landing. I sized up the scene. In addition to Chris and the dude he was leaning on, there were two women, is that Julia Sotelo, and another man. Confusion prickled the back of my neck for a moment. I could have sworn there had been a sixth person, but the pause had already gone on for too long. "Hey, y'all," I said, waving timidly. "I'm M." "N," the guy with Chris said, not a misquote. He must have been thinking that I was some cool, eccentric Californian university student that goes by a cool, eccentric nickname, like, "Fuck you, Mom, I'm not Natalie anymore, my name is N." He shoved Chris's arm away, then lunged forward to clasp my hand. "I'm Percy. It's an absolute pleasure." A silver hoop earring was hooked into his left earlobe, complementing his huge, Niveous smile that reeked with the biting heat of tequila. "And Percy's been drinking too much," Chris laughed, pulling the bigger man away. Chris began gesturing around to other members of the party, introducing each of them. "This is George, Julia, Isabel, of course me and Percy, and then..." He trailed off, searching around with his brows drawn together in drunken concentration until he looked behind him. He shifted aside to reveal a final man who was sitting cross-legged on the ground of the landing. "Josh!" The shock of the confirmation that the Mexican girl in front of me was actually Julia Sotelo suddenly became overwhelmed by Josh. Though I had never seen him before, unlike Julia, whose Vine videos I had watched religiously in middle school, he was the only one of us wearing any color, a blood-red dress shirt and beige pants that stood out against our various shades of gray, black, and white. I realized that while everyone else had been chatting and joking, Josh had been quiet the entire time, his head bowed low and his arms folded across his broad chest. When I had come down the stairs, he had sat down and rested his head on his fist. As I looked down and met his glaucous gaze, he tilted his chin back and looked up at me. My existence was acknowledged, if boredly. "Okay, let's go," Percy cried, throwing his enormous arm around me as we all surged toward the downward stairs. "I'm so glad Chris invited you in. You're gonna have so much fun." "It's M, dumbass," Chris said from behind us, "like Eminem." "Oh my God, are you his daughter?" Percy asked. It was a genuine question. "What's M short for?" George butted in, slipping himself beneath Percy's other arm. I was taken aback by George's English accent, as I had never heard one in person before. I liked the way he said my name, even if he was thinking of the letter. "M." George was a thin black man with a faded haircut who was wearing a white-collared shirt and blue jeans. It seemed like I had dressed correctly. Everyone was wearing semi-formal attire, but not the bars actually the Met Gala attire. "Margaret?" George asked. "E.M.," I clarified. "Oh, Emily?" "It's a secret," I blurted, then inwardly cursed myself. Damn it, that dumb line only worked back home. Now they either think I'm a federal agent or my name is something so utterly ridiculous that it's unspeakable. Like embroidery. To my immense relief, both George and Percy laughed, although the alcohol may have helped. "I'll get it out of you eventually," George said brightly. "Julia, where's the car?" "2 minutes away," Julia called over her shoulder, and George hurried to catch up with her, snaking an arm around her waist. The idea that she was there had not yet fully settled in. Angelica had warned me that I would be tripping over celebrities every step of LA, but I had not truly taken her seriously, especially because the long list of people I would realistically recognize consisted of Beyoncé, Vine stars, and the president. Julia was a makeup artist, one of the few that managed to squeeze her tutorials into Vine's 6-second video limit. She had taught me how to declump my mascara, how to drink from a glass without smudging my lip gloss, and how to smile amongst the relentless bullying of my preteen years. I had followed her profile, Sotelo style, until the Vine platform was shut down. Chris quickly filled the space beneath Percy's other arm, and the three of us tottered down to the ground floor. A laugh escaped me. I was practically lifted off my feet as I struggled to balance Percy between Chris and me. As the group burst into the lobby, I glanced over my shoulder at Josh and Isabel bringing up the rear. Isabel was a tall woman with white, medium-length hair cut into wispy layers around her angular face. As she moved, her head tilted against the shadows, as if no darkness could ever touch her, even in the ghastly lighting of the stairwell. She was sporting a glamorous argent dress and matching heels, whispering quietly to Josh as they stepped through the door to the lobby. Josh was wearing a black bow tie over his red button-up shirt, and his sandy blonde hair was spiked up with gel. His hands were in the pockets of his trousers, his thin lips drawn into a line. Those eyes, the silver blue color of which were still burned in the forefront of my mind, were fixed on the ground, as if he were seconds away from sitting down again. "What's up with them?" I muttered to Chris. "Josh and Izzy," he hissed back, his rancid breath hitting the side of my cheek. "They've been dating for almost a year." "Ah. Are ye seeing anyone?" Chris asked, and Percy looked at me curiously from beneath his mop of bangs. "I moved here like a week ago, remember?" "Oh, yeah." "You can be bachelors with us," Percy said, squeezing Chris and I to his chest. As we headed toward the front doors, I had no idea if I had just been friend-zoned or wingwoman-zoned. "I'm ready," I said, because, like Angelica said, speaking things out loud manifests them into reality. I just really needed that manifestation to happen, like, right then. Sometimes great wisdom is birthed from nuance. The switch did not flip, would never flip, and, as Percy dragged me through that glass door and into the brisk night, it began the slow process of dissolving into oblivion. Because I was born into an age where I learned so much so quickly, it was easy to become confident in my own knowledge as I had grown older. Although I was still insecure, I found some semblance of comfort in all that I had discovered. I had yet to learn the magnitude of all that I knew but did not understand, but to be carried through the opening door was better than being alone. Chapter Trace. As I climbed through the back door of the biggest Uber I had ever seen, Julia twisted around in her seat next to the driver, who was an Asian man with glasses and a GPS clipped to the air vent that seemed to be showing directions in Korean. She grinned warmly at me before her eyes passed on to the next person, and my soul clung to that moment, absorbed it, sent it back a decade to the black-haired M on her iPad, watching that same smile through the screen. I had never had a moment of wanting to boast to my past self like that. I tended to shy away from her, knowing that the many disappointments would be much deeper in those huge emotions, those bottomless dreams. I settled myself into the very back of the van in the 4th row. Then the art within me began to sense that abnormality, some disproportion, some warped line, but Julia's older, I thought. Of course she looks different. No, it was beyond that. I leaned forward a bit, trying to see past where George was struggling to buckle himself into the seat behind the driver, Julia managing a solid slap on his ass all the way from shotgun, and even in the darkness, the moon-brindled shadows betrayed it. Lip injections, my mind said immediately, conjuring up images of before and afters on Angelica's computer as she traced the slope of some new fullness with her ringed finger, telling me that nobody ever wanted to kiss her, and this would fix it. Julia's lips were almost double the size of their former shape, smacking with small pops in between the words she spoke. My brows furrowed. She was already so beautiful, full Mexican with long, syrupy hair. I hadn't ever thought that she needed to change anything. I checked myself. I was being far too judgmental. I had heard plastic surgery was standard in LA, of course, and besides, Julia had always been ahead of the latest beauty trends before anyone else. My fingers inched up towards my lips. Maybe I need some work done. George and Percy talked excitedly in the first two seats behind Julia and the driver, while Josh and Isabel sat silently in the second two, meaning that Chris and I had the back row to ourselves. As the Uber lurched away from the complex, I plucked a small sketch pad, about the size of a credit card, from my purse and began to doodle. The role of the creative can be an isolated one. The writer tucks herself away from the world as she creates her own. The photographer loses hours in the alterations of light and color saturation. The painter watches closely, studying her environment and its people with the trained eye of a mirror that often stylistically distorts. Contours of clothing folds, street lights bleeding in the dark, the extra teeth of a slightly crooked smile. The artist can be so preoccupied with committing to memory and mentally composing future pieces that she forgets to join the captured action as it happens. She requires a friend that takes the initiative, that reels her in from her submersion and her focus, that explains when she forgets to ask for an explanation. "So, Anne," he said as rough forms began to take shape on the small paper in my lap. "Chris," I said distractedly. "Well," he lowered his voice, leaning towards me. "You know Julia and George, right?" "Of course," I murmured, finally tearing my attention away from my work. "I mean, I used to follow Julia on Vine when I was a kid. I'm not too big on social media." "Really? How many followers do you have?" "I meant, I don't understand any of that stuff at all. I have a Twitter, and that's it." "Huh," Chris said, and it almost seemed as if he did not believe me. In Texas, I did not feel like such an anomaly in this aspect. Everyone always started out with exchanging phone numbers as opposed to social media. Echoes of my chameleon complex fluttered in the still stunted future planning of my mind. If they want me to become more internet savvy, I guess I can try. "Anyway, Julia has a makeup channel on YouTube, and then she and George have a shared channel," Chris continued. "They make vlogs, video blogs." I smirked. "I'm not a complete dumbass." He grinned back. "Percy and I collab with Julia and George in their videos sometimes, but our big one is our podcast. We get all these cool guests, and we upload the video to YouTube and then the audio to Spotify and stuff. You listen to any podcasts?" I shrugged. "Sometimes. NPR or the news, stuff like that." His mouth playfully dropped open. "Oh my God, you are such a grandma." I laughed, then went to smack his arm, but decided against it. I was not sure if we knew each other well enough yet. Glancing at the seats in front of us, I whispered, "What about Josh and Isabel?" "Izzy's trying to be a model," Chris sighed. "She hasn't found much work." Then it was my own mouth's turn to gape. "Really?" I asked in disbelief. "But she's so pretty." "Yeah, she's gotten some followers from being in the vlogs, but that's it. And Josh used to have a big YouTube channel, but he stopped posting on it. The fans love him, though. They're always begging for him to be on the podcast, so he films with us sometimes. He still has a lot of followers on Twitter and Instagram, but..." "Honestly, Chris," I interrupted slowly, "I don't really care about followers. I don't think it matters, kind of." Chris blinked. "So everyone met on YouTube?" I said, trying to fill the pause. My scribbling increased in speed. "Yeah, we've all known each other for years, but Izzy's newer. Josh met her at a club, and then she moved in with him less than a month later. I knew it was too fast." My eyebrows shot up. "What do you mean?" I asked curiously, lowering my voice even more because I was sitting right behind Isabel. "They hardly knew anything about each other, and now they fight all the time." Chris swallowed, his face grim. Suddenly, he glanced at my lap. "Is that Julia?" I snapped the cover shut, having not even realized I had begun to draw Julia's lips. "They fight?" I fumbled, my face burning. "Yeah," Chris said. "Now Josh is like a whole different person. He used to be this loud, funny kid, but recently he's all quiet and sad, like Izzy sucked the life out of him." Isabel glanced over her shoulder, her long eyelashes fluttering beneath her feather-light hair. "Did you guys say my name?" she asked. "Nothing," Chris and I exclaimed at the same time, then burst into a fit of faux giggles to cover our tracks, which seemed to work, because Isabel turned back around and resumed staring out the window. When I looked at Josh, I found his head tilted slightly in our direction, as if he had been listening the entire time. My face ashen, I quickly changed the subject. We arrived at Chisme, a lively little bar out in Westwood. Because I was last out of the van, I hardly had a moment to take in the atmosphere, and I stole a glance over my shoulder as we crossed a large wooden patio area in front of the building. There was the big moon I had glimpsed from my apartment's windows, and the shimmer of light pollution ringing above the rooftops. The air was different, more than simply the city noise and smell. Los Angeles felt like a great feathered wing I was pacing along the foot of, trying to grasp onto and catch the breeze before I was blown away. I could wander the streets and see the sights and hear the roar, but I felt no kinship to the land, no real sense of belonging. It was shut tight. The 6 of us ducked beneath strings of fairy lights hanging overhead as we headed inside. Partygoers crowded around the tables on the piano, and there was nobody checking ID at the doors. I always felt a little pulse of excitement whenever I got into a bar because I was still underage. I smiled to myself, feeling very mature, as we walked through the front double doors. Multicolored lights pulsated from strobes on the low ceiling, and it was fairly packed, but not as much as I would have expected for a Saturday. A rock band was playing loudly on a small stage in the corner adjacent to the bar. I weaved through the crowd, sidestepping drunken elbows as I followed behind Chris. He and Percy stepped up to the counter and flagged down the bartender, who checked their driver's licenses. A pang of fear flashed up my throat, and I fumbled for my wallet in my purse. "Buy me a drink?" I asked Chris, slipping some cash into his hands. "Oh, right," he said loudly over the blaring music, and smirked. "You asking me to break the law, and—" I did not catch his playful tone. I blinked. I'm just kidding. What do you want?" "Phew. Sorry, I have a fake, but it doesn't scan. A daiquiri, please." "You are such a white girl." "Actually, I'm Cuban," I said, shrugging and pointing at my black roots. Chris grinned. "Blonde looks good on you." "Thank you for lying," I said, and he laughed. I did it myself. I tried blue, pink, and red before I stuck with blonde. My parents hated me. "Like one of those pens that when you click the button on the side, the tip changes color." "What?" "Like one of those pens—" Never mind. Go join the others. I'll find you there. My nerves spiked at the thought of having to face the Views crew without my only ally by my side, but after downing a shot offered by Percy, my anxiety began to dull. I pushed through the throng of drunken revelers and emerged out on the patio, where George, Julia, Josh, and Isabel had snagged a table in the corner, sandwiched between the intersection of the wooden fence lining the platform. "Hey," I said, pulling out a metal chair and sitting down. I quickly realized, to my immense horror, that I had inserted myself between Isabel and Josh. I tried to brush it off as I remembered what Chris had told me. If they had wanted to sit next to each other, they would have. Julia cried, untangling herself from George's arms to face me fully. "What do you do for a living?" It took me an embarrassingly long moment for me to gather enough breath to answer. "I'm a painter," I finally said. "Well, I used to be a lifeguard, but the dream would be to live off of my art." "What do you paint?" George asked, but his attention swiveled on to where Percy was approaching the table with a round of shots balanced precariously on a silver tray. "Oh, brilliant!" I stared at the crystal clear vodka swirling around in the glasses. It looked like it was going to be a long night. "What's your poison, Em?" Isabel asked, reaching and putting a shot in front of us both. "Anything hard," I said, picking up the glass. "Nothing like beer. Shit's gross." Isabel smirked, a tight-lipped gesture that came off a bit snootily. "Tell that to Josh," she said, disinterestedly flicking her fingers across me. I glanced over to see Josh staring gloomily into his bottle of Budweiser. "Oh, sorry," I said, tuning out the cheers of the others as they downed their shots. Josh's eyes snapped up to mine, and my shoulders hiked up to my ears, the blue piercing a deep spot within me that was akin to thirstiness. I suddenly imagined mixing paint on my palette to match the color. It would take hours to perfectly recreate that shade, with flecks of gray spiraling out from his irises. "It's just not for me," I fumbled. Josh nodded slowly, and I offered him a shy smile. "Cheers," I said, raising my glass at him, then tilting it into my mouth. My throat burned, and I hastily accepted my daiquiri from Chris, who was reaching over my head to place the glass on the table. I sucked a few sips through the straw, sighing as the sweet lime overpowered the acidic liquor, then turned to Josh again, startling inwardly as I found that he was still staring at me. After a charged moment, Josh reached for his untouched shot, then kept eye contact with me as he raised it to his lips. He took the vodka back almost unnervingly effortlessly, baring his teeth after he swallowed like some kind of predator. I could not picture the former Josh that Chris had described. It was hard to imagine anything other than the silent, brooding statue of a man sitting beside me. I had noticed earlier how tall he was, but now he seemed huge, easily filling up his entire chair, and then some. At 5'1", I estimated that he was at least a foot taller than me. "Now I want a daiquiri," Isabel piped up, and I looked to see her rising from her chair. "You want anything else, Em?" "I'm good with this, thanks," I said, raising my glass to her before taking another sip. "Josh?" Isabel asked, her tone instantly switching. She almost sounded like an older sister being forced to ask her sibling by her parents. Josh shook his head, and I realized I had never heard him speak before. I looked at Chris. "Chris, where are you from?" I asked. "St. Louis," Chris said, swiveling around from where he had been deep in some drunken debate with Percy. "Josh and I are the only ones who aren't from L.A. Actually, Josh and I went to the same high school." "Oh, nice," I said, glancing at Josh, whose eyes were following Isabel as she walked inside. "Y'all must have been the cool kids." "Maybe, but it was honestly exhausting," Chris moaned. "Everyone was always asking for shout-outs or to teach them how to be popular. It was like Josh was the only person who didn't use me for anything. Does that make sense? I'm hammered. I get it," I assured him. One of my few talents was the ability to empathize with situations absolutely foreign to me. Trying to bring Josh into the conversation, I asked, "Josh, was your high school fun?" "He got plenty of girl attention," Chris joked, answering for him, "but he's too much of a good Christian boy for all that." "Hey, Julia interjected, "will you take a pic of all of us?" I smiled in affirmation, then accepted her phone from her outstretched hand. "Y'all get together," I said, watching as the View's crew crowded around Julia's side of the table. Isabel had returned with her daiquiri and stood behind where George and Julia were beaming in their chairs. Chris and Percy sandwiched Isabel between them with their matching goofy grins, but Isabel lowered her chin and looked into the camera with the fiery smolder of a practice model. As soon as I snapped the photo, I realized that Josh was still sitting in his seat next to mine. "Oh," I said, but the others had already dispersed, returning to their chairs. I handed Julia back her phone, the idea nagging at the corner of my mind that I had just touched Julia Sotelo phone. It felt like she was a long-lost, one-sided friend I was finally connecting with, but the idea of her actually sitting across from me was so overwhelming that I could only focus on surviving the night minute by minute. "Only one?" Julia asked, looking up at me with a thick-lipped smirk. I must have looked confused because Chris saved me with, "If nobody's eyes are closed, it's a winner." As I sat back down into my own chair, I realized that Julia had wanted me to take more photos. Icy guilt swirled into a fiery sea of embarrassment in my ribcage. The result was pukey. As Chris and Isabel took a selfie video together, I knew I needed to say something. Anything. Is it creepy to ask her about Vine? But what else do I have to talk about? Right then, Josh finally spoke up. "Did you have fun in high school?" Josh asked, and my head snapped around to look at him, trying to figure out what he was thinking behind that intense, reserved expression on his face. His voice was deep and low, barely audible over the noise of the patio. A quiet power, like a knife. "No," I said, and then remembered that neither he nor Chris had really answered that question for him earlier. "Did you?" "Who really has fun in high school?" Josh mumbled, his blue eyes dropping down to his beer. Alright, we've reached a point in the video that very few people have made it to, so I'm gonna change into some comfier clothes. As much as I love this dress, I mean, look at me. Just do like a life update, an experience writing this book update. I've been doing this with the last few book teasers I've written, I think, just because I can like sneak it in at the end. It's like I want to create like good videos that I rewatch and make me laugh and then I want to show to my kids and stuff, but here I can get away with just like talking like a normal person. Okay, I'm gonna start this off by saying that when I read or talk for a long time, my mouth starts to tingle, and it's done this since I was a kid. My mouth gets like super dry and tingly, and I just googled and there's literally no results for it. Like, my mouth tingles after talking for a long time. Nobody is talking about this, so I don't know what's wrong with me. That's a bit concerning. So I've been dealing with cystic acne since like the beginning of the pandemic, so that's like 2 years now, and I thought it was caused by the masks. I thought it was caused by me, you know, not sleeping enough, and then as it got worse and worse, I tried like different diets, like cutting out different foods. I quit vaping, quit smoking, quit drinking. Obviously I went sober. I also got my birth control implant changed, and that didn't help. It's been a hyper fixation for me. Like, it's been really hard to look in the mirror, and I just feel really bad all the time about it, if I'm being honest. That may also be why I haven't like filmed YouTube videos, because I've stopped wearing makeup to try and help my skin, and even just putting on makeup today, I was like, I really don't want to film because my skin is so bad, but luckily the makeup kind of covers it. I never had acne in my entire life. I never got more than like one zit at a time, and even then I would get like one zit every month. Like, I had this crazy skin that I inherited from my mom. I'm just kind of dealing with it. Here are my Valentine's nails. Topic change. I'm gonna get them redone soon, but yeah, Happy late Valentine's Day. This is probably gonna go up in freaking March, knowing me. Back to Complex. I started Complex in the beginning of 2021, like revising it because I wrote the first draft when I was 17. That is called Pale Shelter, and it's now completely for free on my website, the first draft of Complex. But warning, it is like completely different because the whole idea behind the creation of Complex is what would have happened if I hadn't got into college. Because when I wrote the first draft, I was convinced that I wasn't going to get into college. My grades weren't great, my sibling was not getting into college. Just started planning for what would happen in the event that that happened. I wrote Pale Shelter in 21 days because I had such crippling anxiety about not getting into college. Like a lot of kids, I had been told since I was born that I was going to go to college, you know, so this world is so competitive. There was a real possibility that I would not have gotten into college if I didn't, you know, have my writing. So I just thought it had more to offer because Pale Shelter is literally like I moved to LA and a bunch of celebrity boys started fighting over me. That's literally it. That's literally what I thought it was like. Em was originally like 17, I think, or 18, and she was hanging out with like 25-year-olds. This is a little creepy. I just thought that it had more to offer, so I started to revise it. Also, this was the big thing. I thought that it would be easier to revise a book as opposed to just creating a new one because I was looking for that going into junior year of college. I just wanted something easy. It was not. I could not remember what plot points belonged to Pale Shelter or the final draft of Complex or all the drafts in between. I could not keep it organized for the life of me. So that was really, really hard, and that's why it took so long, really. It's also very long, even longer than XO, which was my previous longest book ever. But it also took a long time because I missed my August deadline where I try to put the book up on Amazon and get it done and everything because I don't want to be working on it during school. So because I was working on it during school, it took forever. But also I discovered Pat Conroy last summer, so that completely changed my approach to the story. I basically rewrote it again. It was like I had rewritten it by the summer and then I read Pat Conroy and so I rewrote it again. I rewrote this book like 10 times. I just published it in January, which blows my mind. Like I never thought it would take me that long, and I know it's my self-imposed deadlines and like nobody else noticed, but I care. I care. As I begin this new book, I'm working on a murder mystery, which I think is the book of this year. It's called From the Hands of the Observer. As I begin From the Hands of the Observer, I'm enjoying it so much and I'm so proud of it, and I remember that that's how I felt with Complex, but at this point I've already graduated into the stage where I'm like, ew, on to the next one, you know, which is kind of disappointing. Reading back through it was fine. It was all good. I mean, I also changed the tense 3 times, so it was originally, no, 4 times, because it was originally in present tense, then I switched to past, then I switched to present, and then I switched back to past. I'm happy with it. I'm really happy with the cover. I think this is my favorite cover I've ever done. Something happened recently. I journal a lot, and so I always journal about how bad I am at writing, and I thought to myself, well, how do I know if I'm bad at writing if I've never read my books? Like, I never have read my books, really. I publish them, and then I put them off forever because if I read them, I would just want to change everything. So how do I know if they're bad or not, you know? I get messages still about See Her, which I consider to be one of my worst books, but it touches a lot of people. My roommate, Savvy, liked Complex. She said she could really relate to it, so that's a good sign, and I'm happy with it. Yeah. Another life update. You know, Savvy moved out, and so I've just been living in my dorm with Meander and Basilvia. Then I'm hoping to get into Missioner. I had heard of Missioner, but I didn't really understand that it was one of the most prestigious creative writing master's programs in the country, and it's like 15 minutes away from where I live in Texas. Crazy. I had heard of Missioner, but then when I started like really Googling it as I was looking into master schools, I was like, oh, I want to go there. But they only accept, I think it's 12 people per year. So we'll just have to see how it goes. Fingers crossed. I think either way I'm going to go back to Texas, which is a weird decision. But I want to be near my family. It's my home. I always thought that I would stay in California, get into the industry here, maybe help write some movies. I feel like the pandemic kind of threw my life path astray. Everything's weird. It's hard to go out in public. So I had COVID during Christmas as well. That's another reason why I didn't post. I know I just kind of like vented a lot, but I'm doing fine. I'm really excited for this new murder mystery. My friends are great. My family's great. My plant is best. I'm in love with him. I pour all of my love and energy into him at all times. I love Meander. I care deeply about him. But I have no problem with like ripping off a leaf if I'm sunburnt because he has so many leaves. I stopped eating at the dining hall. I got food poisoning. I think it was like 3 times in the first week I was here. Finding a way to feed myself every day is kind of stressful because I have a lot of things to do, and so to figure out what I'm going to eat and then make it takes like hours out of my day. Yeah, I just want to talk about the murder mystery. That's so hard. My dad called me the night that Complex dropped, and he was like, congrats and stuff, and I was like, okay, yeah, but like this murder mystery, you know? He was like, stop, enjoy it. I think he literally said that to me. He was like, enjoy it for a second, and I just can't, so that's not fun. And who knows even if the murder mystery will be the book of this year, you know, because I like to do one a year. I was originally planning on doing the Blue Daisy trilogy, you know, putting all of my graphic novels up on Amazon, but this murder mystery has been consuming my life. One, because I've always wanted to write a murder mystery, like my entire life. It's such an iconic genre, but that's what makes it so difficult, because like everything's been done. So the fact that I've gotten this far into one is really, really exciting for me. So last semester was super, super lonely because of Complex, because I'm also triple majoring technically. You know, it's double majoring technically. It's double majoring. It's like English and creative writing, but since I'm double emphasizing in creative writing, I have 3 capstones. So I call it triple majoring. That is a lot. My classes are really difficult, and with Complex on top of that, I really didn't leave my dorm at all last semester. I mean, I'm not new to this because I missed prom so I could write See Her. Like, I sacrifice everything for my work all the time, so it's nothing really new to me. But this semester, I'm still not really going out because everything gets canceled because of the pandemic. And my friends, you know, I've surrounded myself with other like-minded people who are also very academically oriented and are doing multiple majors and study a lot, so I never really see them because we're all busy doing our own things. But every once in a while, we'll go out on the quad and tan, and it's really, really nice. So I miss YouTube. I'm always thinking about it, always coming up with new ideas. I have plenty of ideas, and my little cousin Lola wants to be in them, so I'll have a little sidekick for this summer. As usual, I'm grateful this semester, grateful to be here, have the opportunity to study, be in such an amazing dorm. Thank you for watching and supporting. It means so much to me. Social media has kind of been overwhelming for me recently just because I want to respond to everyone thoughtfully, but my brain is in a million different directions. So many of you are so nice. I got so much support for Complex. God. I sobbed when the new Lord of the Rings trailer came out. It debuted during the Super Bowl, and I just sobbed, and I tweeted it at them, and they asked me if they could keep the video, so we'll see what happens with that. I worry that it's not going to be very good because the Peter Jackson movies are so iconic, and that's really hard to live up to, but I'm trying to keep an open mind. As soon as I saw that trailer, I was 8 years old again, like in awe of the Balrog. I was like, oh, that was so sick, you know? Or I was 13 going to see The Hobbit in the theaters for the first time, so I just sobbed. I'm a crybaby at movies these days. I sobbed at Spider-Man No Way Home for literally 90 minutes. Like, I started crying as soon as Matt Murdock appeared on screen and did not stop until halfway through the drive home. And then I cried at Shang-Chi just because I was sitting there thinking to myself, I will never make anything this good in my life. The crisis of confidence I've been dealing with for the past while is still there, but journaling helps a lot. Me realize, like, girl, what are you talking about? You know, you're all right. Something like 10,000 people worked on Shang-Chi, you know? So I'm 21. It is February 20th, 2022, and we've got another one in the books. Thank you, Complex, for everything. As usual, I learned so much. It feels so good to hold you in my hands. Like with Pat Conroy, his books are semi-fictional. You know, they're heavily influenced by his life, but they're also heavily fictionalized. I tried that approach with Complex for the first time, trying it way even more with the murder mystery, but it's dangerous, you know, when people you know in person appear in your books. I was obsessed with the Marc Jacobs lip gloss for forever, and they discontinued it. I finally found a good alternative, I think. I'm really hungry because I don't eat on days that I film, so I'm skinny, and so I think that's why I'm a little off. I mean, I'm gonna interview my grandma for my nonfiction capstone, and thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to become a part of our Conqueror family. I'll try to post more. I have all of these ideas, but I'm just trying to not put pressure on myself because I've got a lot to deal with, you know? It's supposed to be for fun more than anything. It's supposed to be a record of my life, like I always say, and although I wish that I would go viral because I deserve it, I'm just chilling. This is for me. I always try to remember, this is for me. Book shout out any of Pat Conroy's books. I'll see you guys soon. Bye. Sup, you sexy little Okay, so my favorite color is white. I was gonna say I'm a white girl. Like I was like, I'm a pink girl now, JK. I'm a white girl. But that's obvious. That sound has never come out of me before. Yeah, it's so hard because I'm already working on the next book. Shut up! I moved into the quiet dorm and my roommate moved out, so I made a big old massive bed. Alright. Audacity is doing the Audacity is already running thing. See, these issues happen like every 2 years, so I've just forgotten how to fix them. Why do I have to do all of this? We're already having technical issues. That's how you know it's gonna be a good video. I'm manifesting me to never have to do anything ever again. Recently, like, men have been obsessed with me. Not just recently. Me trying to convince myself that I have Sanpaku eyes. I googled and maybe I don't want that. It may be a bad thing, but I just thought Princess Diana and Billie Eilish have it. That's a club I want to be a part of. Everything below into a shiny, flat... I was trying to figure out where to clap. I was about to hit my head. Then the book. Ugh. Amazing. Is that Julia Sotelo and another man? Let me look up how to pronounce Sotelo. I think it's Sotelo.
Pronouncenames.com. Sotelo?
Sotelo. My God, I'm tired. Two chapters literally took 2 hours. I am so hungry. Chapter Trace. Chapter Trace.
Cheese me. Cheese me. Cheese me.
Cheese me. Cheese me. A quiet power like a knife. That's a good line. A quiet power like a knife. Did I steal that? Probably. By Complex. Not by, but, you know.